Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with Get Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series, and today Karl is going to channel Seth Farber, who is an author and someone very active in the mental health field, and he was kind of a rebel rouser, someone who was against the established mental health system and a great defender of those who had been harmed by the mental health system, and he passed away in October of 2021. And I think a lot of people who met him or looked at his work became fond of him because he was kind of up against a very large and established machine, being the mental health system here in the United States and elsewhere. So that's our topic, our subject for today. His name is Seth Farber. And Karl and I will have a discussion about this. And unfortunately, we know more about this than a lot of people. But he should be an interesting subject for us. We have 6 questions from today. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Karl, and off we go.
Okay, thank you, Danny, for hosting this, and to all of you who are watching and taking an interest in something that's near and dear to us, and very much a mission for us to bring forth information and expose the soft underbelly of the evil that encroaches on the world, basically. And we know quite a bit about it, and there are many avenues it takes to corrupt our institutions and our thinking personally, collectively. And anything that sheds light on the actual truth of things has an ability to shift thinking, to be more open and more understanding that there is truly a method to the madness, to be apropos, that there's a strong dark force that is abroad in the land and influencing everything to one degree or another. So this is an arena that is one that's very painful for those who are involved in it. It's frustrating for the healthcare providers. It's frustrating, obviously, for people who are unbalanced or have struggles with their emotions and at times lose control. And it's a very slippery slope and very uncertain in spite of the fancy talk and the sophisticated language and the esoteric psychological profiling and descriptions of
And all the
workings of the
drugs.
mind, and yeah, and then the drug implementation, as though that is an answer when it is at best a masking of symptoms. So it's a very frustrating arena. And I didn't understand this as a scientist for 30 years and working in the drug discovery arena for the pharmaceutical industry, because that's the current answer
Yeah.
that the mainstream believes in. So I got caught up in that as a young person and a researcher and scientist. And late in my career, I was going to be forced to work in a neuroscience area because the section I've been working on, I needed to transfer, and I didn't believe in it. I didn't see there were logical, meaningful, promising inroads possible to use drugs to influence the mind. Now, this seems like an easy call by the average person because we've been so programmed that it's all a chemical imbalance issue.
Right.
But that's not what it is. And I knew intuitively there was a deeper issue going on. And I didn't want to be wasting my time and energy on something that I felt would be fruitless in the end. And I was right. And now I've gone on and discovered the true cause of serious mental illness. And so I know we'll get an earful today from our subject, but it's a story that very much needs to be told. So I'm really looking forward to this. I've been bumping into this arena all my life. My parents were working for the Karl Menninger, the Menninger Clinic and Research Foundation in Topeka, Kansas, back in the 30s, and he was quite an important force in psychiatry, probably considered America's psychiatrist during much of those 1900s because he was such a powerful and authoritative voice and seeking himself for true answers
Mm-hmm.
and never really finding them.
Mm-hmm.
But he tried everything, and that's where my parents became involved. And they were doing things like music therapy and kind of occupational therapy approaches to help them connect again to real life and doing active things in real life, and not just being in a kind of prison where they're in their room or they're in the day room and then they're back in their room and nothing really happens. They didn't have TV in those days. It was soporific. So anyway, I don't want to get off track here, but
well, it's interesting to look at a lot of that because, not long after that, they're going into shock therapy, lobotomies. Yes. We did have a channeling subject where I think she was subjected to a lobotomy, Frances Farmer, and if I'm not mistaken, if that actually did happen, I think it did. And other channeling subjects where we've got into this topic from time to time. We've done webinars on targeted individuals, and so you could, if you look into any of this, you could see that they're kind of starting with a net negative, and it's probably more so in their case than in a lot of other arenas. Like if you're trying to fix something and you go to the established institutions, it's not like going to get your car fixed where you can actually bring your car somewhere and there's a good chance you'll get it fixed. You might have to spend some money, but you can fix the car. And in the human realm, this is like just the opposite. You could spend years and years and years and thousands of dollars and get nowhere, and even end up in a situation where you're worse off than when you started.
Yeah, that happens all too frequently. And part of it is the existing approaches and tools are not up to the task. And more than just being a kind of make work exercise, doing what you can with the remedies available, it allows things to worsen because it doesn't really necessarily prevent that from happening either.
Right. And the question might be, cui bono? Who benefits? I mean, why is it so easy to get your car fixed, but you can't get your uncle fixed who's mentally ill? Who benefits in that scenario? You know, why hasn't the progress been made in that arena like we've been able to make progress with something in technology like transportation? And then, you know, that's the underbelly that you're speaking about earlier. You know, evil is here. Evil has a cause, and evil has agents. And if you don't recognize those for what they are, then the solution is going to forever elude you. You'll never figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there is an active suppression of human endeavors of all kinds. And it was one of the saddest experiences of my life to learn that scientific research is suppressed. Not only what gets worked on, that can be quite limited and controlled and misdirected, so the attention is focused on false avenues that end up in a dead end, and good ideas are ignored, sidelined. But even when things reach a stage where they're tested clinically, you know, like a new drug agent that's highly promising.
And they're asking the right question.
Yes, they're asking the right questions, and they have a promising agent. The clinical data and the outcomes can be manipulated by the darkness to change the outcome of a clinical study. So if you can't believe in science, you know, what else have you?
Right.
You know, this is supposedly the gold standard. You know, we have to believe in science, do what the science shows and what it tells us. And if the data are flawed because they're faulty, then you're nowhere.
Right.
You don't know where you are, basically.
Right.
Yeah. And so there are so many dark aspects to all of what we're talking about here. But it's a good thing to get into because awareness gives us an opportunity to change things. You have to have a motivation. And most people are manipulated to be complacent. And we want to increase awareness and get people to take action. And by that, we mean reaching out to the divine for assistance. You're not going to get it from the government.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get it from the medical societies or other regulatory bodies or oversight bodies, the institutions, the medical schools and universities and the research centers and so on. They're caught up in the process as it is. They're frustrated, but they only see it as a human level problem. You know, it's just a bunch of egos. So people fight with each other and it slows everything down.
Yeah.
And they just think it's human failing and weakness and ego-based manipulations or unfortunate, obstructions or roadblocks and so on. But it's more than that because people in their very makeup can be manipulated. And the idea of targeting is one of the most drastic and dastardly examples of mind control, where they can get people around someone to turn against them and harass them and make their life miserable. Even healthcare providers charged with helping people in need. And it's just unthinkable that this could be so. But I assure you that it is.
Yeah.
Doctors are weaponized to kill their patients. I'm sorry, this is one of the things that happens. So I'm looking forward to what we can learn from this individual's perspective. And it's often the people who had some skin in the game as a human being and then passed on who we can reach in the light to give us feedback, what they think now and what their life meant from their new perspective, a loftier one.
They can see the whole picture now.
Yes, and they have a karmic involvement
Yeah.
in the struggle. And that is a good source to go to because it gives them more standing to be forthright
So
and helpful on that subject.
so again, his name is Seth Farber. My primary source for research for this guy, besides just what I could find easily on the internet, is a book called "Madness, Heresy, and the Rumor of Angels: The Revolt Against the Mental Health System." And so that's there's the title, there's the cover, and then there's another book that I found. I found this one later, and it's called "The Spiritual Gift of Madness: The Failure of Psychiatry and the Rise of the Mad Pride Movement." And there's a foreword in that book by Kate Millett, and she's the author of "Sexual Politics and the Looney Bin Trip," which sounds pretty interesting too. So anyway, he's written some other books. You can find some pretty interesting interviews of him on the internet. They tend to be kind of older, but they're worth a look. I think this is kind of a marginalized topic. He didn't get a lot of press for this. It's just unpopular. People. I think people are generally more comfortable with TIs being pigeonholed the way they are. I like one of the quotes I'm going to use in one of the questions coming up is mental health professionals, with rare exceptions, believe TIs are paranoid psychotics who are not targeted by anyone. And that's kind of like, if they're all pushed into that category, then a lot of people feel like they themselves are more safe, And so there's a lot of, paradigm influence to kind of keep things the way they are, because then we don't have to ask any more questions, and we can go about, eating our lettuce and watching TV, So I don't know. I'm a big fan of this fellow because he kind of went where he was going to have a career of being a very unpopular fellow, but he stuck it out.
Well, I think it's heroic, and we need more people like that because we're going to go down if we don't turn things around. The way things are headed, it's getting darker and darker, and there's less reason and wisdom being applied in the world, and more knee-jerk acceptance of ideological thinking and narrow vested interests who want power and political control. And they're being manipulated to cultivate that and suppress individuality, suppress individual liberty, freedom of expression and thought. And we've seen that happen before, all around the world. And it doesn't end well.
No, it does not.
It usually ends up with prisons and genocide and famine and war.
Yep. A lot of pain and suffering. Okay, so we have 6 questions for Seth Farber and potentially a long channeling, so maybe we should go ahead and get started.
How many questions have we got, Denny?
6.
6, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try and discipline myself. We'll see. I only have so much control over this, so we'll see how this goes.
It's not. I don't profess to have an easy solution to keep these in bite-sized, lengths of time. I'm actually very grateful that we get the detail that we do get, because the questions aren't going to cover sometimes what should be covered. So that freedom, the freedom to expound on something is very valuable. We've gotten a lot of really good things, despite the occasional bad questions that I might ask. So, the door swings both ways here. Yeah.
Yeah, and the agenda is ours, but we also have a wider agenda.
Yeah.
And the light knows that. And when they have an open door to speak freely and on record, they'll take it.
Yeah.
And they'll try to get extra information across because it's a prime opportunity. So
right. Okay.
That's the problem we run into. There's too much to learn, too much to know. And they take the view that the people who are watching this may only see this one offering from Get Wisdom.
Right.
And we have so many important things to teach and to raise awareness about. They want to kind of at least have some of the basic foundational things at least referenced in each of the offerings. So that makes it hard.
Yeah.
That's why these things are long, and they tend to be repetitious if you're, a devout follower, because we get a lot of the boilerplate talk about the interlopers and this sort of thing, and so, but it is important.
Yeah.
And it's a validation as well that, oh yeah, here we go again, it's the same old thing. The interlopers are behind it.
Right.
There's a deeper culprit here than just a misguided human perspective. So
Exactly.
all right.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and do my thing and connect to Seth Farber in the light. And I'll do this through Creator of All That Is. It's how I do my channeling to ensure accuracy and safety and avoid manipulation, because that's routine with anyone doing an intuitive outreach. You will be noticed, and the first one to interact with you will likely be a lower order being. Why? Because if you're not reaching out with the loftiest of intentions and a very, very strong belief in the Almighty, the Almighty has to stand back a bit, and there's a competition, and the dark might take a hold and answer your query and do a handshake. And if you aren't thinking about the possibility of encountering an imposter, you'll get suckered and they'll dupe you. And this has happened to most channelers, unfortunately, because they just can't conceive, if they're reaching out to an archangel or an ascended master or something, or that would be allowed to be interfered with. But it's no different than down here.
Right.
We're still down here, and so our outreaches are down here, technically speaking.
Right.
So we're just cautioning people to be very careful and looking at any channeled information. And the best defense I can make about what we're doing is we're exposing the evil, we're exposing the things that are wrong, and you won't typically get that from other sources.
Right.
You'll only get sweetness and light and encouragement and lofty notions, and that's fine. It's very touchy-feely and encouraging and happy sounding, but we have real serious problems, and that's not what's being engaged with.
Right.
With solutions.
Solutions. Right.
Yeah. So this is, can be unpleasant to hear, but you have to know there's poison or there's a tumor or whatever it is in order to correct it. So
Yeah.
I will get in the state of consciousness I need to put safety around the work, and then when Seth Farber is on board, he'll announce his presence. This is Seth Farber speaking.
Thank you for joining us. It was reported that you passed away as a result of a brain tumor Saturday, October 16th, 2021, in a New York hospital. What were the circumstances regarding your death, and were you able to transition successfully?
My death was a natural one because it was karmic in origin, as is true of most physical maladies, unless there is a perturbation from the environment, whether deliberate or inadvertent. I was able to transition effectively as a consequence of being in spiritual alignment. This is difficult for people to know exactly, because for most people, they are alone and very much feel that way much of the time. And particularly with regard to things like spirituality, it is a private experience and mostly a solitary endeavor, other than the surface trappings like church attendance What goes on in your mind and heart are your province and no one else's. There are many who pay lip service to faith who are only faint-hearted believers in the hereafter, doing it more out of rote, out of habit, out of expectation from others that they need to fit into a community, and so they do, with the surface involvement. But it is not truly deeply felt, honored, and nurtured along. That is quite important. It is not an empty exercise. What is empty is what religion encourages you to do over and over and over again in worshiping the Almighty, praising the Almighty, thanking the Almighty. We can tell you, as a resident of heaven currently, that Creator is at my elbow, so to speak, wanting this communication, wanting to support you and the work of Get Wisdom, and very keenly interested in human progress. You will not progress by prostrating yourself and worshiping the divine. You need to make your world better, and you need to change the equation from the current energetic contest favoring evil over divinity. It is up to you to tip that balance, because we cannot do it for you from the light. You must ask for help to get it. So my good fortune was I was relatively in good alignment and very much a free thinker, and allowed for the reality of the divine to be a part of my experience. And that was a saving grace, literally, for me in getting divine support, in preparing for my transition, despite my grave faltering condition at the end. But keep in mind, everyone dies of something, and it is built into the system. You will wear out or give out, as the case might be. How that comes about can be managed up to a point if you are forward looking and take advantage of divine assistance for healing and protection from outside sources that will attack you and undermine your physical well-being. This is the arena we are going to be exploring. And the thing to keep in mind is that for every dark foray by the evil ones, there is a divine answer and a human one. When you are David and facing Goliath, you can choose to have the slingshot, or you can have the slingshot with God to help you stay calm and focused and dedicated to your cause, so that whatever you choose to do will be your best effort. This is what every champion wants to see happen. And in every contest, it is those who stand strong who prevail. It is all about energy of one sort or another. And there is indeed divine energy and an intertwining of human and divine energy that carries with it the greatest resources for information and the ability to interact with others with effect and help you in all you do. This is what separates a successful person from one who is a failure, unless they have evil on their side making up a shortfall. They too can succeed in materialist ways, but they will not have any benefit when they move beyond their current situation, because not only will the divine not embrace them, not being a match to the energy of the divine plane, they will reckon with the law of karma that will seek retribution on behalf of their victims to level the harm they caused, and it may come out of their hide, literally.
Okay, thank you. You are an outspoken advocate for those harmed by the modern mental health system and defended the idea that there is such a thing as a targeted individual. Now that you are a light being, can you give us the divine realm's perspective on these two topics?
This is a very troubled arena indeed, and we very much enjoyed the discourse prior to talking with me, because it is a very astute perspective that things are off kilter in your world. And in a sense, the world has been manipulated to be somewhat in a state of madness culturally, by becoming blind to realities on display through willful corruption of thinking, installation of false beliefs, and perpetuating a kind of suppression of initiative to make people complacent and accept the surface of things as a kind of answer, as if labeling something tells you all you need to know about it. It is clear from the most cursory examination of mental health care that all of the theories, all of the psychologizing, all of the many, many years of attempted therapies and learned discussions about the psychodynamics of human thought and experience, you are a little closer to understanding what makes a mentally ill person act like a psychotic. And that is a purposeful state of affairs, because humans themselves are manipulated by hidden actors, a dark alliance of dark spirits and extraterrestrial beings in a formal agreement to work together in suppressing, subjugating humanity, and ultimately intending to destroy it. That underlies all of the evil in your world. It started with the dark spirits corrupting physical beings from their spirit realm state of being, because they can move into the energy of the body and take up residence and begin to perturb their host in various ways. People are manipulated heavily each and every day through the media. There is much subliminal mind control manipulation that is routine and ongoing. Whenever you are looking at a screen, whether it is a cell phone, a tablet, a computer, a television, or even listening to the radio or playing music that is pre-recorded, there will be a subtext, an electromagnetic emanation that goes into your deep mind and manipulates your beliefs, arouses emotion to shape your opinions. On top of that, individuals who are known to have been a problem for the extraterrestrial alliance in the past, including prior incarnations, will likely be targeted to sideline them, to suppress them more heavily. And if that cannot be arranged, kill them outright. This is not a small number of individuals. It is fully 5% of the population who are treated this way. They are pushed and poked and prodded, tormented, confronted, undermined, disparaged, discouraged, and attacked in endless variety of ways to influence their life to make it worse. It starts from the cradle. The parents are manipulated to neglect the infant, or if they are emotionally volatile, to be more judgmental, harsher in reacting to the inevitable burdens of dealing with a squalling child, and may well engage in violence directed against even the infant, who may not stop crying because it too is being tortured. Half the time babies are crying without seeming cause, it is because of dark spirits inside them, tormenting them, menacing them. It is truly terrifying. It is not imaginary, it is real. The consequences of manipulation by dark spirits within the mind can become quite grave. And that phenomenon needs to be recognized and put on the map officially. This will be a challenge because it is a multi-component phenomenon involving things still as yet not accepted by mainstream thinking. And that is part of the problem. And it keeps the secret quite nicely when it is simply inconceivable and a physical impossibility as dictated by science and the scientific perspective of the day. There will be no forward progress because there will be no acceptance of the possibility of these phenomena being real. This is a tragedy. considering especially the scope of the problem. Not only is it 1 in 20 people, but that cohort of humanity has among the worst lifetimes of anyone in human history, many of whom through the ages were targeted to end up with a dark fate. You are much more likely to end up in prison, to end up in the poorhouse, to end up with chronic, incurable illnesses, or to become mentally ill and incapacitated from being targeted. The reason that can be is that the mind and body are interdependent. Science itself is recognizing this more and more. It is the basis of understanding the role of stress as a chronic liability if it is uncontained and not resolved in its origins. It takes a toll to undermine the body and undermine emotional well-being and mental health. That is still only one component of the problem. When dark spirit possession is driving this inner torment to the level a person is chronically anxious and eventually becomes depressed and despondent in a state of helplessness through exhaustion, the damage has been done that will persist lifelong and beyond. A targeted person will be in a karmic setup to start life behind the curve, so to speak, and struggle from the outset once again. And indeed, they may very likely be set upon to give them the same kind of treatment. The targeted individuals, if they are sensitive in particular and vulnerable to emotional breakdown from being subjected to endless bullying and harassment by the dark spirits possessing them, talking to a deep part of the mind below conscious awareness, will be increasingly programmed to alter their very beliefs. And this imparts delusional thinking and the ability to have that migrate into higher awareness in the upper subconscious level of the mind, and then to be lodged in cellular memory within the brain as a store of knowledge and belief systems. The person will be trained through repetition to focus on and agonize over a kind of training program of torment, and will take over the role and begin to torment themselves. This is no different than someone training a canine to be an attack dog. It is malicious and malevolent and evil in its origins and purpose, but it is the way these dark spirits think. The dark spirits themselves have been commandeered by the extraterrestrial alliance, particularly to work on targeted individuals, to give them an extra dose of undermining through their own mind becoming disordered in the way it thinks and delusional in its belief system. This not only will disrupt their lives, but will mark them as unstable, unreliable, and perhaps dangerous, and will be seen by others as a potential threat. And people will run the other way and shun them. These are the people who end up in institutions in the end, or homeless on the street. It is a tragedy because it is compounding evil through one of its most severe consequences in the soul deadening that results from having a lifetime sidelined entirely to be spent in suffering and perhaps focusing on dark thoughts introduced by another consciousness so as to participate in the crime. This too becomes a karmic burden and an obligation of the hapless victim to one day set right. This is a tall order. So this is what you are working with, a flawed system of inadequate treatments and an insidious, clandestine, surreptitious manipulation directly of human beings to undermine their thinking, their beliefs, and the workings of their own mind for the worse.
Okay, thank you. You wrote, mental health professionals, with rare exceptions, believe TIs are paranoid psychotics who are not targeted by anyone, unquote. What would one look for when trying to determine for themselves if a loved one is indeed a targeted individual? And then, what could be done to help them?